Thank you all for coming. I think we may have some people from the public looking in, and we'll entertain questions at the end of the discussions from the public. I want to thank Mr. Horton for coming today. And I want to make sure that we follow the agenda that we've got here. So let's see what we've got here.
Mr. Chair, if I can just go over the legal jargon for the Zoom required meeting. So this is the Stockbridge Board of Health meeting for February 19th, 2021, 11 a.m. And so pursuant to the governor's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, general law, chapter 30A, section 18. This meeting is being held via remote participation in the greatest extent possible. Every effort is being made to ensure that any member of the public may access the meeting in real time via technological means. Agendas will be amended to show the link and participation code to access the meeting no sooner than 48 hours before. Recordings and/or draft proceedings of the meeting will be available on our website as soon as possible. And Mr. Chair, I want to recognize there is a quorum of the Stockbridge Board of Health, and this meeting is being recorded. And upon the conclusion of the meeting, a link will be sent to CTSB, and they typically will post these meetings on the CTSB TV org website. All right, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, so let's see. Can you get us? Here we go. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll put the minutes up for you, Mr. Chair. I mean, 1 second.
I got the agenda here for everybody in case we need it. And what we're going to do is, let's see. Okay, this is the previous minutes. I distributed these to everybody before. Did everybody get them?
Yes.
I'd like a motion to approve the minutes or make any corrections.
I move to approve.
A second?
Second.
Second by Ray. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, the minutes are approved. Now the next item on the agenda, we have a discussion of the mosquito control program. Dr. Schwerner will start this up, and we've had some information distributed by Jim. And Hank, you want to start off with that?
Yeah, about a month ago, I became aware of an article that was initially written on December 1st, 2020, and appeared in the Boston Globe, revealing that in September of 2020, an array of toxic compounds known as PFAS or PFAS has been spread by spraying the pesticide Anvil 10+10 used for adult mosquito control. These PFAS chemicals are known as forever chemicals, as they can last forever. And they're linked with illnesses such as cancer, low birth weight, childhood developmental problems, dyslipidemia, thyroid problems, asthma, immune system effects, among others. Spraying took place in Eastern Mass with the Anvil 10+10 for years, and it's thought that these toxic chemicals have leached into the groundwater and other water sources. Clark Mosquito Control is a company based in Illinois that produces the Anvil 10+10. It also produces Duet, a similar product, and that's used in the sprays by the Berkshire County Mosquito Control Project. Clark stated that the PFAS chemicals are not used in the making of their pesticides, but acknowledged that PFAS chemicals could have been introduced through the packaging of their products, again, Anvil 10+10 and Duet. PFAS are man-made chemicals that were developed in the 1940s, initially used for such things as water repellents, fire retardants, and non-stick cookware. The chemicals accumulate over the years, again, forever chemicals. And again, the health effects go from asthma to testicular cancer. In January 2001, the U.S. EPA issued a statement that the containers used in the shipping and storage of the mosquito control pesticides are leaching the PFAS chemicals into the pesticide project. Clark has stated the containers for Anvil 10+10 and Duet can have this problem of PFAS contaminations. The Mass DEP then stated that about 32 of the 164 public water systems that they tested have more PFAS chemicals than, quote, allowed, unquote. Among the contamination sources are from wastewater treatment plants, consumer goods, and again, spraying for mosquito control. I spoke with a representative from Clark and was told that they have stopped all sales and shipment of their product in the questionable containers. They've also told their customers not to use product associated with the contaminated containers, as they will reimburse and reship pesticides in PFAS-free containers. Again, this includes both Anvil 10+10 and Duet. I also spoke with Mr. Horton a few weeks ago, who stated that he knew about the issue of PFAS contamination. However, to my knowledge, the Berkshire County Mosquito Project to this date has not officially informed the Tri-Town Health Department or the Stockbridge Board of Health about this problem. So again, this appears to be one more toxic issue that's come to light secondary to the spraying for adult mosquito control. As you said, Charlie, earlier, Jim has sent out a bunch of articles about that. So Jim, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Schwerner. I mean, the one thing I'll add, and I think you said enough what you said is, so I got a bunch of calls too, about kind of sandwiched into the 800 I get a week related to COVID issues. And I had no idea about this, to be honest with you. And I actually went back, and Dr. Kenny and I had a quick conversation a couple of weeks ago about the Boston Globe. So I just went back and printed out a bunch of this stuff. I had no idea about this, but I guess my points of concern, and I think that's why we asked Chris here, just to kind of get an idea, like from his perspective, what's going on. But I know time and time again, we're told that things are done by EPA standards. There's nothing of concern. It's not just mosquito control. It's anything that has an EPA approved label on it. But it's just with all the work being done with the Stockbridge Stewardess program, kind of looking at the macro view of like what's going on in the community. I'm very familiar with PFAS compounds because we work with DEP and DPH, and that's a prevailing topic that's picking up a lot of conversation, in particular to water supplies. And Hank did say it's a forever chemical, and Stockbridge is served by a lot of private water supplies. Not everyone's on municipal water, and they rely on the environment in the watershed influence as they draw up that water supply, and it's not treated. If you have a really good well that has a deep casing and the sanitary seal's in good shape and it's disinfected routinely, there's low risk of potable water supply. But we know that chemicals are applied in Stockbridge in a variety of locations. I still don't know exactly where, but I think there's a public health concern here. If those sprays were used that had those PFAS and other toxins in it previously, I think the town needs to know that. Is that a yes or no question? And two, if it's a yes, what are potential public health impacts associated with that? Because PFAS has been found to cause health issues, and people are relying on their water supply and the environmental impacts associated with drawing that water supply, untreated, by the way, for their potable water supply use. I think that's just one of many concerns that I have, but that's sort of like what I want to do is just put that out there, because residents should be notified. I mean, when we have public water supply wells that are permitted and overseen by DEP, and for the public to understand, a public water supply is a water system where at least 25 people use, and that's regulated and overseen by DEP. There's all sorts of drinking water standards associated with that. For example, we have the Mackinac water supply. It's a seasonal water supply up on Mackinac Road that at one point serviced a lot of the seasonal homeowners, many of which have gone off that seasonal water supply because people are living here year round now versus seasonal. But that's still a permitted water supply. White Pines is a permitted water supply because they serve many people. That's a little bit, so there's all these oversight regulations with these water supplies. You have to have an operator. You got to do VOC chemical testing. You got to be disinfected. There's a lot of oversight with these public water supplies, as there should be. The town of Stockbridge itself has their own water supply system for the municipal water supply, where they draw off and they treat, and then they distribute that. They regulate it heavily, but these single homes, they have their own wells. We permit them for construction to make sure they meet setback to septic and property lines and things like that. But once the well is constructed, there's no more Board of Health oversight for these private wells. And the point I'm trying to make is with these regulated water supplies, if we have an elevated lead, elevated sodium, there's a hit of bacteria. I mean, there's boilers that are issued. There's all this crazy stuff that goes on regulatory wise to protect the consumer. These private homeowners aren't subject to that. How can we notify them and protect them and their consumption of their own water supply? And I think when these things come up, at a minimum, residents should be notified of this. If in fact, those chemicals were used in the town of Stockbridge that had traces of these chemicals. And I'll yield the floor and I'll let others speak.
All right, thank you very much, Hank and Jim. Mr. Horton, would you like to say something, please?
Yeah, sure. I am aware of the PFAS issue. It's about 2 months old since it was discovered by a third-party group that analyzed Anvil 10+10. They found levels of PFAS at levels of detection in the order of 250 parts per trillion. And as Mr. Schwerner said earlier, that Clark Mosquito was informed. They were unaware that there was PFAS in the product. And then they worked with EPA to determine the source of the PFAS, and they're still in the process of analyzing processes, and it's leading to the conclusion that it's probably leaching out of the plastic containers that the pesticide is stored in. The levels are very low, but they shouldn't be there, and everybody knows they shouldn't be there. The fluorinated containers, the high-density polyethylene containers, the fluorinated containers are used in a number of products. So it's going to basically end. Clark has voluntarily offered to buy back all product, replace it with product that comes in non-PFAS containers, and it doesn't basically affect the registration or use of the product. So that's what I know about it. In terms of notifying our constituents, it's an ongoing investigation, and there's not really valuable information that I could give out at this time. There I know the Boston Globe article was, you know, a surprise to basically everybody in our industry and community. So I did do a little research on the PFAS, and I just as a outside observer, but I did find that the average level of PFAS in the human bloodstream in the United States is 2.5 parts per billion, or micrograms per liter. So that is many times higher than the level that was found in this pesticide. So I think to implicate this pesticide in PFAS found in the environment at a significant level is probably will end up being a stretch.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Can I ask you a quick question here? I know you mentioned, I think, that an independent group tested the chemicals and found the PFAS in it. I read something that said that Clark had actually tested the chemicals and didn't find it either. Is that correct?
Clark did find the pesticide, and EPA also found the pesticide. Part of the problem was that PFAS, there are protocols for detecting PFAS in water-based solutions. These pesticides were an oil-based solution, so there had to be an accepted protocol to determine if the test was accurate in the oil-based product. So that was something that all the entities had to agree on, because there was it hadn't been done before. PFAS hadn't been looked for in oil-based solutions before this time.
Okay, one other question. Is it true that one of the executives of the Clark Chemical Company is on your 3-member supervising board?
Yeah, Wally Terrell is on our board, and I don't think he'd be called an executive. He's a sales representative for Clark Mosquito. Clark Mosquito is based in Chicago, Illinois, and it's a global company.
Okay, thank you.
Wally is a regional sales representative.
Okay, thank you. Ray, would you like to ask questions or put in any input?
I guess the only thing that, Henry did a great job of summarizing everything. I guess the only question I would have, has there been any discussion of how to clean up the contaminant that's already there? And is it possible to?
Mr. Horton, would you like to respond to that?
In terms of, I don't think that, in terms of, I'm not sure how long, basically I can't comment on our product. I don't know if our product contains PFAS. The product we've used hasn't actually been tested to date. Anvil 10+10 has been tested. So I can't give any indication of what the status of locally is. In terms of PFAS, they call it a forever chemical. That means it's got a long-term lifespan in the environment. So I'm not aware of any measures to mitigate any PFAS, other than I am aware that they've had problems. For instance, Hoosick Falls, New York has had problems from manufacturing processes that related to a gasket factory that released PFAS into the environment there, and it was found in their water. So they instituted a filtration system in their water supply, and that's what they did. But I'm not aware of any presence of PFAS in the local environment or water supply.
Is there any testing going on for Duet? You said you don't know if it's in there?
I think they will eventually test Duet, and probably all pesticides used in the United States will eventually be tested. And, you know, if PFAS is a concern, if this is of significance, then the process will move forward to, you know, deal with it.
And for how many years have we been using Duet in Stockbridge?
Duet's been used for the time that I've been here, probably 15 years.
Yeah, my information was that, yeah, the Clark says that it's probably in both products. So, yeah, so we probably have contamination.
Okay, before I open it up to the public for a few questions, which I will in a moment, I'd just like to clarify one point made by Mr. Horton. Please comment on this if you want. Generally speaking, in the environment, when we have toxins, the concentrations, for example, PCBs or whatever, may be relatively low, but the body, unfortunately, with some kinds of toxic chemicals, has the ability to concentrate these toxins. So, for example, a blood level of a toxin that's a factor of 10 to the 3 greater, let's say, than the concentration that's found in the environment doesn't necessarily mean that that particular toxic chemical does not contribute to the further toxicity in the body, especially if the body concentrates that particular chemical. So I just want to bring that point up. I don't particularly agree with the idea that it would not be thought of as being contributory, because I don't think that makes sense to me. Now, as far as would anybody who's in the, we have a pretty good audience here. Would anybody like to add any questions that haven't been brought up at all?
Mr. Chair, Kate Fletcher has her hand raised.
Okay, would you please ask your question?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any way for residents who are on private wells to test their water for the for this chemical and other pesticide residual chemicals as well.
Okay, anybody want to answer that question?
I mean, I don't know if I can answer that, but if I can give you my perspective on that, you know, so, you know, we have people own their own wells, right? It's not regulated by the municipality unless you're on town water, then you wouldn't need a private well. And so the only way to do that is for residents to pay out of pocket for a full VOC test, which can be several $100s. And I also, I don't know how to navigate this, but maybe it's a question for Mr. Horton. I mean, we probably want to talk to DEP in their water supply division to ask, should homeowners be testing? Sit back and wait? I don't know, but that's a concern of mine, and I don't know if there is a concern. I'm not saying there is or there isn't, but without knowing what went on, and we had to do our own research to find, I think those are valid questions, and we're getting calls already from residents asking what the health effects are on their own water supply in their own wells, and that puts Tri-Town in a unique spot because I don't have the answers to that. And so if people want to have their wells tested, it's going to be out of pocket to the homeowner, which I think is unfair.
What about testing waters from Lake Averack or from Stockbridge Bowl? Has that been thought about?
Does anybody have an answer to that?
Again, I'll interject again. I'll call DEP up and start asking questions early next week because I was kind of not aware of this issue until a couple of days ago.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah, I was wondering if what areas are typically treated in Stockbridge? As far as, is there an overall plan that is used by mosquito control?
We keep records of all of our adulticide treatments, And actually, that would probably be, I mean, if they're, eventually, if it does, if there is a quantifiable contribution that we've made, that could all be traced.
Could we
Basically
get those records?
the entire amount of product that was used in the town, and the level of PFAS in that product, and the number of acres covered could all be, put together.
Any other questions?
Anita has her hand raised.
Anita?
You're on mute, Anita.
Are you on mute?
Okay, can you hear me now? Right.
Yes.
I was just curious. Last year I had emailed you, Mr. Horton, and asked how long Stockbridge had been in this program. And I recall you said 1946. So I was wondering how far back your records go of what we've actually been treated with.
So Stockbridge was one of the original members of Berkshire County Mosquito Control Project, established in 1946. Our records, we have annual reporting that goes in this office, goes back into the 1960s. The requirement has been that we keep our records for 10 years.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I have one more question. This is.
You didn't raise your hand and Mike did.
Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
I heard it asked, it was about a request to get the records. Can we get copies of those sent to the town hall and to the Board of Health?
Actually, the Board of, yes. I would, generally, we could do it with, I just like to have a request. What?
I'll put a public information request in.
It doesn't have to be that, but I mean, just what you'd like to know and from what periods, and I can give you that.
All right. Is one follow-up, is there an annual disclosure for the person that's on your board that also is a sales rep?
That process has gone through the Massachusetts Ethics Department.
All right, can we get a copy? I'll request a copy of the disclosure for that also. Thank you.
Yes.
Jim, would you like to ask a question?
Anita's got another question. I'll wait to the end.
Thanks, Jim. Hank kind of touched on this. I was concerned about whether there had been any aerial spraying over the lake, or if the pesticide has gone in the lake, because that was another article that was in the Boston Globe about lakes being contaminated. It was mainly over in eastern Massachusetts, I believe.
Right. The article in the Globe referred to the aerial spraying for eastern equine encephalitis in 2019. So most of that spraying was done in southeastern Massachusetts.
Thanks.
No aerial spray has been done in Berkshire County.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so before I ask the board to discuss this a little bit, Jim?
Yeah, my last question, and I want to frame this question carefully, and I don't know if this is a direct question for the Board of Health, the Select Board, or Mike Canales, who's the town administrator for Stockbridge, but I definitely want to put some inquiries into DEP. As Mr. Horton said, the investigation is ongoing, and I don't know how long that's going to ensue, but as we start to get more inquiries from the residents in town asking about testing and what the town's obligations are, I will pose this question that doesn't need to be answered today, but like, the town of Stockbridge through their cherry sheets in whatever form it's used. It's not direct funding, but we get less money back as part of this. I think you may want to talk to town council on the town's obligations on, you're buying into a program, and if residents start to push back asking for responsibility of the town and what the liability is here on their own private water supplies, I think it's in your best interest to talk to town council about that, because as this becomes more investigative and comes more to the light, we are going to get those questions, and Tri-Town is not in a position to respond to those types of inquiries from situations. So are there obligations from the town, because it's a town program that's funded on testing people's private water supplies? And people do have a right, regardless of the toxicity level that may or may not be there, they have a right to know what they're consuming for their private water supply. And that's basically all I have.
Any other questions?
I guess, Charlie, I'd just like to comment that I'm concerned, maybe this is not the time to talk about it, but I'm also just concerned generally about the use of pesticides in as much as it impacts the environment and biodiversity and the role of.
I'd like to try to keep the questions and the comments directly related to the subject that we've asked Mr. Horton to be here for. I don't want to keep him any longer than he has to. Thank you very much. I'm
Okay.
sorry about that. We'll entertain that at a later date. Now, if there are no more questions or comments specifically related to the topic here, what I'd like to do is to close the public discussion and bring and ask the members of the board, including Jim Willis from Tri-Town, to comment on and give any opinions about where we should go from here. Hank, do you want to kick us off there?
Well, again, we need to get the studies that are being done, because we need to test the water again in large water areas for PFAS chemicals. And I think Jim is right. I'm on a well next to the lake, and I'm concerned about my water supply. I would love to be able to test mine, and I'm sure other people feel exactly the same way. We need more answers, and we need more testing. I know that in the readings about PFAS chemicals, it was stated that there are certain proprietary issues in terms of the manufacturing of these products, Anvil, 10+10, and Duet being some of them, that companies do not give out. They consider secret ingredients or whatever. So is testing going to go on of these products even after the containers are replaced with quote safe unquote containers?
Okay, so what I'd like to suggest here, and I'm going to leave this up to you and Ray to agree with this or not. I mean, I think we have two different kinds of ideas to deal with here. The first idea is the idea of what the things we can do to try to improve our town's and public's understanding of what's happened so far. And I would like to suggest that we could go forward with the idea of how to figure this out by each of us separately, now that the presentations have been made, collating some questions that we would have, collating some next steps, and putting those forward at our next Board of Health meeting after we've had a chance to review this and do everything. And that would be our effort to make suggestions, and to Mr. Horton and his company perhaps, and other suggestions about how to move forward from this. I think that's a something that we need a little bit more reflection about. But so that kind of, I mean, we can post these things as rhetorical questions now, but I think we'll do better if we actually get down and put them together as a list so that we can do it. How does that sound to you and Ray, in terms of the discussion that we'll deal with now, rather than going into detail about that? I'd like to one of the things that I think I meant by asking about this particular discussion here is I'll just frame it in terms of a question. Do you think we should continue with this mosquito control program the way it is?
No, I do not.
No. I do not either.
Absolutely not.
And do you have, I mean, do you have any, well, let's put it this way. I'd like to make a comment. I'd like to say to Mr. Horton, first of all, thank you very much for your efforts in the past to help the community out with this. You know, we all acknowledge that there are mosquito problems, and the problems vary from health-related issues, you know, such as Eastern equine encephalitis, which, as far as I know from my research, has never occurred in Berkshire County. And then there's although Eastern equine encephalitis is a very serious disease. On the other hand, there's West Nile virus, another arbovirus that is very prevalent almost everywhere. But the disease, unlike Eastern equine encephalitis, is not a serious disease at all. In fact, most of the cases go unnoticed. You don't even know you had it. The two issues are the public health issues, I think, that face us. And of course, there are always other mosquito-borne disease that we have to deal with. And I would want to think that we would always want to be able to fall back on Mr. Horton's expertise in delivering those weapons to stop the spread of the disease through mosquito control when we need them. I have to say, though, by virtue of the history of what we've gone through so far in our communications with Mr. Horton, even a simple question like what Mike Canales put forward, you know, we've asked several times to find out where these chemicals were being sprayed, when they were being sprayed, how much was being sprayed, and how the costs to the town were being allocated. When we consider the large amount of this might have been simply used not for disease prevention, but for nuisance control when people, for example, at Tanglewood didn't like to be bit by mosquitoes. Now, this idea has other components to it that I think can be debated, but one of the things I think everybody should keep in mind is that DEET is a very simple way to prevent mosquito bites. Now, DEET is not a toxic chemical. I'm sure that any chemical that's used in huge amounts, whether it be butter or water or anything, is going to have deleterious effects. But DEET is not known to have any really significant effects when it's used properly. It lasts for 5 hours when you spray it on. Not only does it prevent mosquitoes from biting you by disturbing their sense of smell, it also stops what we all in the Board of Health know is a current health hazard, Lyme disease. It stops deer ticks from biting you. So when you spray for mosquitoes and you get 5 hours of protection, you also get protected against deer ticks, which is the carrier of not only Lyme disease, but other mosquito-borne illnesses that are current problems in the county. So I'm going to suggest that first of all, I think that Mr. Horton had very well-intentioned activities with respect to Stockbridge, but I believe, considering the fact that we never really had a good handle on how, when, where, or why the chemicals were being sprayed, or the cost allocations, and since the use of these chemicals in some towns in the Berkshires has not resulted in any difference in degree of West Nile virus compared to the towns that don't use the sprays. And since the diseases are not really high on the radar at the present time, and we would expect that we could always reinstitute spraying when we needed it, I'm going to say that it's my opinion that Mr. Horton, as well-intentioned as his program has been, doesn't have the capability to give us the information and the database that a public health entity like the Board of Health needs to have in order to recommend this to the town. And to the contrary, now when we're dealing with a potential public health hazard, instead of being advised about this initially when the hazard was identified, instead of having today the information that would obviously be important for the community if it is found that the toxic chemical is or has been used in the county, instead of having the locations of the places in town in hand today for us to be able to use if needed. We don't have any additional information at all. So I think that that's another side of the coin is that when a potential hazard does arise as a result of the spraying thing, we're not being notified in a proper way that we can do what we want to do. So I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to the town that the mosquito control program be discontinued, not funded anymore, but that we keep in mind the fact that we can always use these things in the future if we need them, and that other things are available right now to control the nuisances. So that's my motion, that we discontinue the mosquito control program.
I second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye, it's a unanimous vote. So we'll make that recommendation to the select board that it be put on the warrant as a warrant item. And again, Mr. Horton, I want to thank you for your efforts in the past, and I hope that we can use your services in the future as we need them. And I hope also that your company, and especially with your ability to have someone from that Clark Chemical Company on your board, will give us the information that we need so that if it is found out that your chemicals did have this toxin in it, that we'll be able to act as soon as possible. So if you could give this information to us about where these things were sprayed ahead of time, I very much appreciate that.
And just in response, I'd just like to say that I'd caution the board not to act prematurely. I mean, this is an ongoing investigation. It may or may not pan out to be of significance. You're making the recommendation to withdraw from mosquito control, which will also withdraw the town from arbovirus surveillance. And in order to re-enter the mosquito control program, the town would have to go through the same process of vote at town meeting to reinstate the process, and that would be relegated to the next fiscal year. So I think that, and the other thing is, you mentioned my company. I am an employee of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Berkshire County Mosquito Control Project is an entity of the Commonwealth, and the Commonwealth is committed to doing everything necessary to ensure that this investigation moves forward. Any necessary mitigations are implemented. And I guess that's where I'll leave it. You know, the board, you know, at its discretion will go where it will, but I just wanted to make it clear that this is the state of Massachusetts investigating a situation that has recently been discovered, and everybody on board is committed to making the appropriate mitigation.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Horton. I'd like to ask Mike Canales or Jim Willis to weigh in on this. Would we be able to, if we found in the future that there was a rising incidence of serious mosquito-borne disease in the county, would we be able to initiate a targeted program if we found that a targeted investigation program utilizing potentially services outside of the traditional mosquito control program annual program? Would we be able to start protecting ourselves and figuring this out without going through that entire year wait that Mr. Horton just described?
So the short answer is yes, but you would have to contract out privately. And obviously there's a cost to doing that as well. You know, there are certain advantages and disadvantages being part of the Commonwealth's mosquito control program. You know, but if there were an instance where there was specific targeted area in town, the town could contract out with someone to investigate and possibly mitigate. Can they do the entire town? Probably not. So yes, there are pros and cons with that. And Chris is right. If the town, the mechanism for entering withdrawing is similar. There has to be a town meeting vote. It's got to be sent to Department of Revenue. It's got to be in writing, and then you're done. So, and then you can't re-enter that program until the following fiscal year and put a request in to join. So there is a mechanism for joining and withdrawal, but some communities do contract privately. Do I know what vendors are out there and what their scope and cost is right now? Absolutely not. That would be something we would have to investigate. But the short answer is yes, the town does possess the ability to find someone, to help deal with that. And my last point before I forget is more towards Mike and his records request. I would definitely see in your request to ask what areas of concentration that were sprayed, because what I don't want to do is, we are still fighting COVID at the department and we're spending a lot of hours focusing on that. I would also like to know, like Chris said, the Commonwealth is investigating. It'd be helpful for the town to know what department that is and the point of contact so we can communicate, because DEP is not going to magically come out to Stockbridge and start sampling surface water at Lake Averick and the bowl and stuff like that. It would probably be at the cost of the taxpayers for us to do that kind of surveillance testing. And I think it will be beneficial for the town to have a point of contact. We can bring them to a meeting and have those discussions and keep us abreast of the ongoing investigation. I don't really have an opinion on the Board of Health's vote. I'm the agent of the board. That's beyond my pay grade. That's for the board to decide where they move that vote next. But I don't know if there's an obligation for the town or mosquito control or the Commonwealth per se, start notifying residents in our town and all the other towns that are part of mosquito control. People should have the legal right to know what's possibly affecting their water supply. And I'm not saying it is or isn't, but there's the possibility. And I would hope we're not waiting to an end of an investigation, then react to the residents.
Thank you, Jim. Mike, would you agree that there was a potential for a stopgap program to pick up the slack while we waited that year to get back into the program?
There would be ways to do it, and there probably would be challenges too. One of the things I will say, and Chris, I believe you were the one that I was dealing with. I was actually up in Clarksburg when Clarksburg, Mass looked at the possibility of stepping away from the mosquito control program. In the end, what Clarksburg ended up passing at a town meeting was we eliminated the indiscriminate spraying in the town, but we stayed within the program for the testing and then for the ability to call upon mosquito control, such as it was only, I think, a couple months after the town meeting, there was a cellar hole that was found that was covered over and was just full of mosquitoes. And then we contacted mosquito control. They came up and treated that individual one. But what it came down to was basically the town put in that we were not going to do indiscriminate, that it would be a more targeted approach, but we did stay within the program. So I believe that was about 12 years ago, Chris?
Yeah, actually, yes. And Clarksburg did modify that program 3 or 4 years ago. They had high levels of West Nile virus and they backed it up. They did some spraying that year, but yeah, I mean, that's something that we could do is have any use of adulticide go through Board of Health approval. I mean, that would be possible.
Good. Well, thank you very much, Mike, for that. And Chris, I think that, getting control of this idea and bringing it into a perspective that allows us to use it the way that it makes sense from a public health point of view is really what we're all trying to do. And also try to get it so that the costs are related to what the town benefits from. And in terms of public health, rather than nuisance control for various entities that the town might not feel were ideal or need the benefit, whereas the town would rather have it itself. Anyway, I'm sorry that I'm long-winded sometimes. I apologize if I lost that concept there.
Mr. Chair, Anita has her hand raised.
The public discussion has been closed. I'm sorry, Anita.
Okay.
The idea is we'll get to that again. We do have a lot of things on our agenda. I want to thank Mr. Horton for coming. I want to thank the public for their questions so far, but we've already voted, and we respect the opinions of other people. But I'd like to close this discussion, move on to the next agenda item. Thank you.
I just had one short thing. You were looking for a point of contact for this whole issue. That would be the State Reclamation Mosquito Control Board. They're the oversight entity for all mosquito control projects, and they have DEP representation on that board.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Can you send that to Jim by email so he knows what it is?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so the next issue is the Tri-Town updates on COVID-19. Jim, do you want to take that off? Kick that off there?
Sure, I'll try to be brief because I know we're almost into the hour. So, we're, as you may know, the rates are coming down countywide, statewide. There's active vaccination clinics happening. The North County at the St. Elizabeth's Parish, BCC, and then W.E. Du Bois Middle School in Great Barrington, those are happening. The governor announced yesterday that the age category of 65 plus and or anyone with 2 health conditions are allowed into the clinics. That's happening, and when that announcement made, the site crashed.
Excuse me, who makes the determination about the 2 health conditions?
So how that's set up now, the CDC and the Department of Public Health on their websites have a list of certain health conditions that are qualifiers for that. And so that's on.
I'm sorry I interrupted, Jim. Go back to your regular discussion. That was adequate. Thanks.
Okay, so what people should be doing is continue to go to getvaccinated.berkshires.org to see what clinics openings are happening. It's all contingent upon the availability of vaccines, but I know there's quite a bit of openings as of yesterday. I haven't checked today, so people should check on that. And so just for people to understand, if someone's going to go that have 2 health conditions, there's no secret police at the door trying to look at medical records. It's all done through the attestation process when you apply. So if I have 2 documented health conditions, I will document that through an attestation form as I apply for my clinic opening. And it's really about the honor system, right? So we're moving towards that. Statewide has been a little bit more than 1 million at least 1 million vaccine doses administered. We're hoping to hear more early next week or early March about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which will only require 1 dose. But for the meantime, we're still using the Pfizer mix of the Moderna, which requires 2 doses. So that's going on. The complaints have really dropped. I think people are just eager to move through this process. 65 plus subgroup in priority 2 is a massive group, right? And we got to do this twice. They're saying in the state over 1 million people are within that category. But as long as those vaccines continue to come through, we're feeling that it will take us about 4 to 6 weeks to get through that first round, and then obviously commit to all the others for their second round. In addition to that, we're working closely with the housing authorities in the senior housings. So Stockbridge Housing Authority, the Curtis, Turner Terrace, which is in Lenox, and some others in Lee. We're working with Berkshire Health Systems, and they're going to be sending staff to the senior housing to get them vaccinated. So I'm working behind the scenes on that. And that's basically the updates. We still need to send the message that even if you've been vaccinated the first time or the second time, you don't have true immunity till after the second dose post, like they're saying, 10 days. People should still be masking, washing their hands, social distancing. The gatherings order Indoor and outdoor is still in place. Restaurants and food services at 40% capacity, and the safety standards are still in place. They're not just going to disappear. We need to continue to move along through the vaccination systems and continue to fight COVID. And hopefully we get to the spring and early summer and we really start to see the benefits of the vaccinations. And that's really the update for COVID right now.
Thank you, Jim. Ray, Hank, do you have any questions?
No.
The public, anybody from the public have any questions about this? Okay, thanks, Jim. Thank you very much. I have one question. Is the Johnson & Johnson an mRNA based vaccine?
No.
No. Isn't it attenuated virus, or is it just a whole virus, a live virus? Okay, we'll research that for the next time. But it isn't an mRNA virus vaccine. Okay, so let's just see here what we've got. The next update, Ray, you're going to be giving us a little bit of an update on the age-friendly Berkshire situation and how you've been working with the issues of the elderly.
So you put me in touch with Catherine Kemen, and I reached out to her. Correct me if I phrase this wrong, Charlie. She's working within a grant that basically focuses on global warming and how it affects the elderly here in Stockbridge, and you participate in that. Is that correct?
I do. Mike, do you want to weigh in on the designator there?
Yeah, so that Catherine's from the BSC group, and she is our consultant in the MVP program, which is the Massachusetts vulnerability planning. And this is around identifying climate issues, but Stockbridge did an expanded scope to address senior resiliency and senior housing. So that's where that is.
Yep. So I did, in fact, get in touch with her, and I sent her, if you'll recall, I got a survey from AARP, one from the University of Charlotte and one from Tufts of Massachusetts. And between those three, I put together a survey that focuses on housing, but also physical and mental health. And does Stockbridge have things to facilitate physical and mental health, as well as housing issues for people who are aging in Stockbridge, age friendly. I sent all of that material to Katie, and she got back to me, and I'm not sure if I shared this with anybody else, but Charlie, I forwarded the survey she came up with. Again, she's working within a certain scope. So her survey doesn't include, she did pull a lot from what I sent her, but it doesn't necessarily include the physical and mental health aspects. And do we have things here in Stockbridge to, address those issues as people age? So it seems like we're sort of, the circles sort of are crossing, and there's certainly data that we're both looking for. So I just suggest that we share data with each other, because we seem to be, crossing a lot of paths and trying to achieve the same goals here. So I would just ask for continued sharing of knowledge and working together to see, like I said, where we go from here to help the aging population of Stockbridge.
Well, thanks for doing that, Ray. Mike, would you say that there was going to be a way that the MVP program would link up with that idea, the way Ray is speaking of it?
I'm not sure. I actually have a meeting later today with Katie from BSC Group, and I'll ask about it. But I know this came up also from the planning board about some questions they were looking for in senior housing and whether or not this survey could. There are things that we can ask that are within the scope of the of the grant that we got, and then there's stuff that is not considered part of the scope, which then we cannot bring that into. So, you know, I can ask Katie if there's any way we could have some type of additional questionnaire or something if we were to segregate that out from the grant itself and pay for it from the town, maybe, to ask some additional questions, or whether or not it might have to stay separate just because of the reporting back to the state on this program.
Do you have a distribution plan for your survey? Because that didn't seem clear to me.
We're working on the distribution plan. That's actually part of discussions that are happening with a couple of us this afternoon, talking about how we're getting this out, you know, how we're even conducting some of our meetings because we can't do them in person, where these will be done in person, and flyers handed out, people brought to a local church. I know that's what we did in North Adams. We had it at the Elizabeth Center, and people came in, filled out survey. You know, right now, how we're going to do them, what's the best way to get them back? You know, because we're concerned that we're hoping, how do we make sure we're getting a sizable number back will be our biggest issue.
Yeah, like if it could be, you know, assisted with the town hall to make sure that it does get out to all the appropriate people, you know, maybe perhaps the grant could pay for some of that. And I would certainly suggest, just a suggestion of a return envelope, just to make it as easy as possible for people to, you know, participate in the survey.
Right. We're looking at, return postage envelope, postage paid. So they just put it in, return it. How would it be set up? You know, some of them could just be fill out the survey, you refold it, and it's already stamped, and you send it back. We're going to look at those different options on how to best get it out.
Thank you. And I do think that Catherine does intend on keeping in touch with me and keeping me updated, and you know, same with her.
Okay, well, Ray, I wanted to thank you also for helping Jim out a little bit this week with that local situation that we have. And I understand as a spinoff of that, you might have talked to some of the clergy in town or whatever and discussed a little bit about maybe getting some other support from a volunteer group. Can you want to update the board on that a little bit?
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to do that with my work schedule this week. I did have correspondence with Jim in regards to this case in particular, and did make a couple suggestions, and some progress has been made with this individual.
Okay, good. And you spoke with one of the leaders of the congregations in town, maybe discussed a little bit about.
Oh, yes, correct, I did, yeah. And actually, I thought that he was going to join us today, but hopefully I can chat with him again. Yes, I did have quite a lengthy conversation with Brett. Yes.
Okay, so we can pick that up at a later meeting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. And then,
Mr. Chair, can I just add to the age-friendly conversation real quick, if you don't mind?
go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple things, and one of the things we always want to think about, and we struggle with through various municipalities and health departments, is that, you know, we do have an older housing stock. Our seniors are getting older, and we're always trying to keep them in place, right, as long as we possibly can. And what happens is we get involved in a lot of these housing issues that are really complex, and it's something that's a topic that every municipality should always be talking about. You know, affordable housing, senior housing, community services. You know, and as that conversation continues, and hope to try to identify other resources within a municipality that can lend a hand. You know, in some cases we get these housing severe sanitary code conditions, but they're part of a congregation, right? And then we can figure that out. The second piece too with this age-friendly thing, and if the board recalls, Berkshire Regional Planning a couple of years back had a significant amount of funding in grants that they were working on age-friendly Berkshires. Bobby Orczy, who is a former Board of Health member in Pittsfield, have done that. And I remember having this conversation with Ray about a year or two ago. We started talking about the ARP survey, and And I have put in multiple requests into Berkshire Regional Planning and see if we can get our hands on some of the goings on in the work that they've already produced. So we're not spinning our wheel and reinventing the wheel. It becomes this thing with Berkshire Regional Planning. They get grants here, they get grants there, they do it for a year or two. It'd be helpful to be able to share and get our hands on that information. And I'll try again to reach out to Laura Kit Ross, but Mike, I don't know if you have connections at Berkshire Regional Planning, but like there's all this work that had happened. And even though the grants went away and they had to relieve the coordinator, there could be some foundational pieces that they still have that they should be sharing with our community, so we're not spinning our wheels. And while there may be opportunity under the MVP grant in the scope that Mike's talking about, there could be other opportunities through the Board of Health and other grants that Stockbridge and Tri-Town can tackle to assist the community. And I think for me, it's a little bit of a frustration factor where like all this work was done, but like it's not being shared with the towns. We need to get our hands on that. It's not proprietary. It's public dollars that were used to promote public goings on, and we need to try to see what they have, if they still have it on file. Share that with us so we can take the ball and keep moving on it within town. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Mike, you want to pitch in there?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, look at what they have and see if they have anything thrown on. I know they have a database somewhere with all the reports that they've done. I'm trying to remember how to access that.
Ray, something to add about that? Not to interrupt Mike, but Ray,
Yeah, no, what I recall, Jim, is that our timing was really, really bad. And when we did reach out to her, her position had just been let go. So I think that would put a big barrier up to our obtaining works that had been done.
Yeah, and my point being, Berkshire Regional Planning has so many hands in everything, but like share that with us, so we can reinvent that. There could be pieces of what they've accomplished.
Yeah.
Walkability, healthy aging. I think the Planning Commission has an obligation to share that with our municipalities, since we do commission them in dollars, taxpayer dollars are used to support Berkshire Regional Planning on an annual basis. Share that with us.
Okay, any suggestions from anybody, including the public, about how to start that?
I'll get in touch with Berkshire Regional Planning and see if what they have. And then whether or not we can find the studies or at least get drafts of where they're at.
Okay, well, thank you, Ray. I thank you for this. I think the problems with the elderly, the issues with the elderly are going to be increasing in town. Obviously, we have an aging population, and this is obviously the MVP program is looking at climate-related aspects of that, which will be useful. We need to have a comprehensive approach to it, I think, and I appreciate your spearheading that, Ray. Thank you very much. I also want to, before we get on to the last topic of the old business, I want to thank Mike Canales for joining us today, because he gives us a little taste of reality and implementation capability. So thank you very much. And so the next item on the agenda is my report about the Stockbridge Bowl Surveillance Committee. Just in brief, we had a very, very fruitful report from GZA, from Dr. Cortman and Dr. Burpee, his new assistant or colleague. And basically, we found several very important aspects about the condition of the lake. The Stockbridge Bowl from the 1980s has not deteriorated in terms of eutrophy or tendency to go sour, so to speak, if you want to think about it that way. It's remained relatively stable. In some ways, it's improved. The clarity of the water is better. The upshot of that is whatever we've been doing, whatever we haven't been doing for the last 20, 25 years seems to have been working. So it's important to keep that in mind when we respond to and deal with other issues as they come up in the lake as we move along. And that is, I think, part of the Stockbridge Bowl Surveillance Committee's next step, which is to put in place a comprehensive lake management program. So that what is done in the lake in the future will be managed by science and people who are knowledgeable about how to implement that science. And that's what we're looking to do. But that was a very positive report that we had last week. So I just thought I'd bring that up to anybody. Do we have any new business? Anybody want to put up any new business that's urgent? Okay, well, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Okay, thank you. Everybody in the public, thank you for your contributions, and have a nice day.